My daughter-in-law said, "This is a special blend for your nerves." I gave her my glass and watched her collapse 20 minutes later, convulsing on my farmhouse floor, while the doctors at Forest General Hospital told us she'd been poisoned with enough sedatives to put a horse into a coma. Angela, my son Marcus's wife and a licensed pharmacist, had just tried to drug me with what she claimed was herbal tea for my anxiety and confusion. But I'd switched our cups when she wasn't looking, and watched her drink her own poison meant to steal my 400-acre farm. If you've ever suspected that family members were trying to drug you into incompetency, if you know what it feels like to catch someone using their medical knowledge to destroy your mental capacity for financial gain, if you've ever had to choose between trusting your daughter-in-law or trusting your instincts when millions of dollars in farmland are at stake, pull up that chair and hold on tight. Because this story's going to show you that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones with pharmacy licenses and family access. And sometimes the only way to expose systematic drugging is to let the poisoner taste their own medicine. I'm Harold Jefferson, 76 years old, been farming in Yazoo County, Mississippi my whole life on land that's been in our family since my great-grandfather bought it from a white farmer in 1934. 400 acres of some of the richest delta soil you'll find anywhere, worth over $3 million now, but worth more than money to me because every acre represents 4 generations of Jefferson family blood, sweat, and determination to hold on to something that could never be taken away. My wife Ruby and I worked this land together for 52 years before she passed 18 months ago from complications related to diabetes. Losing her left me not just heartbroken, but struggling to manage the farm operations, the business decisions, and the daily routines that Ruby had handled so expertly for decades. That's when my son Marcus and his wife Angela started their campaign to help me with what they called my increasing confusion and memory problems. Angela had always seemed like the perfect daughter-in-law, a smart woman with a pharmacy degree who'd married my son 8 years ago and given me a beautiful granddaughter, Emma. As a licensed pharmacist, Angela seemed uniquely qualified to help an elderly farmer manage his medications, his health concerns, and the stress of operating a large agricultural business alone. What I didn't realize until it was almost too late was that Angela wasn't trying to help me manage my mental health. She was systematically destroying it. Using her pharmaceutical knowledge and my family's trust, she'd been drugging me for months with sedatives and psychoactive medications designed to make me appear confused, forgetful, and incapable of managing my own affairs. The warning signs had been building for months: unexplained drowsiness, memory lapses, and episodes of confusion that seemed to get worse every time Angela visited with her specialties and herbal supplements for my grief and anxiety. But I'd trusted her completely because she was family and a medical professional, never imagining that my own daughter-in-law was poisoning me to steal my land. That afternoon, when Angela insisted I drink her latest nerve-calming blend while explaining how it would help with my declining mental state, was supposed to be another step in her plan to have me declared incompetent. Instead, it became the moment her drugging scheme backfired in the most dramatic way possible. When a suspicious farmer's quick thinking turned a daughter-in-law's poison into her own medical emergency. And if you're wondering how catching my daughter-in-law trying to drug me led to criminal charges for elder abuse and a family scandal that shocked rural Mississippi, well, hit that subscribe button on Grandpa's Diaries, because this story's about to show you that sometimes the people who marry into your family are more dangerous than strangers. And sometimes the only way to prove you're being systematically poisoned is to let the poisoner experience their own medicine firsthand. Angela used to seem like a blessing for our family, the educated daughter-in-law who brought medical expertise and modern thinking to our traditional farming household. When Marcus brought her home 8 years ago, Ruby and I were thrilled that our son had found someone with professional credentials who seemed to understand the value of hard work and family loyalty. As a pharmacy graduate from the University of Mississippi, Angela had impressive knowledge about medications, health management, and the medical challenges that elderly people face. "Mr. Jefferson," she'd say during family dinners, "with my background in pharmaceuticals, I can help make sure you and Miss Ruby get the best possible care as you get older. It's wonderful when families have medical professionals who can look out for everyone's health." I remember how helpful Angela was when Ruby's diabetes got worse in her final years, researching new treatments, organizing medication schedules, and consulting with doctors about the most effective management strategies. She seemed genuinely devoted to Ruby's welfare, often spending entire weekends at our house to monitor blood sugar levels and adjust insulin timing. After Ruby's funeral, Angela became even more involved in my daily care and household management. She'd visit 3 times a week, bringing groceries and what she called therapeutic teas that would help with my grief, my sleep problems, and my anxiety about managing the farm alone. "Harold," she'd say, "losing Ruby is traumatic for someone your age, and you need professional support to process this kind of loss without letting it affect your mental health." Angela had a way of making her assistance seem both necessary and scientific, explaining how grief could cause cognitive decline in elderly people and how the right supplements could prevent depression and confusion from becoming permanent problems. "I've seen what happens to widowed farmers," she'd tell Marcus during family conversations. "They often develop anxiety disorders and memory problems that make it dangerous for them to live alone or make important decisions. What I thought was exceptional care from a loving daughter-in-law was actually the beginning of a systematic drugging campaign designed to make me appear mentally incompetent. Angela had access to my house, detailed knowledge of my daily routines, and pharmaceutical expertise that allowed her to administer psychoactive drugs in ways that would create symptoms of dementia or cognitive decline. The most insidious part was how Angela used her professional credibility to isolate me from other medical opinions. "Harold, you need to be careful about mixing different doctors' advice," she'd say, when I mentioned wanting to see specialists about my increasing memory problems. "Too many medical providers can lead to dangerous drug interactions. It's better to have one person who understands your complete health picture." Marcus supported Angela's medical management completely, probably because he was already being influenced by her suggestions that I was becoming incapable of managing the farm safely. "Dad, you're so fortunate to have Angela looking after you," he'd say. "Most elderly farmers don't have access to professional medical care in their own families." The systematic drugging began about 6 months after Ruby's funeral, when Angela started bringing me what she called grief support supplements that weren't available at regular pharmacies. She explained that her connections in the pharmaceutical industry gave her access to cutting-edge treatments for elderly people dealing with loss and life transitions. "Harold," she'd say during her increasingly frequent visits, "I've been researching the latest developments in geriatric mental health, and there are some amazing new compounds that can prevent the kind of cognitive decline that often follows spousal loss. They're expensive, but Marcus and I want to provide them because we're worried about your emotional stability." The supplements came in unmarked bottles with handwritten labels, which Angela explained was because they were compounded specifically for your psychological profile by colleagues who specialized in personalized geriatric medicine. She'd supervise while I took them, measuring out precise doses and timing them with my meals like she was conducting a medical experiment. But instead of feeling better, I started feeling significantly worse. My memory became unreliable, my concentration disappeared, and I began having episodes of confusion and disorientation that I'd never experienced during 52 years of successful farming. When I mentioned these concerning symptoms to Dr. Thompson, my regular physician, he was alarmed enough to order comprehensive blood tests. "Mr. Jefferson," Dr. Thompson said after reviewing my lab results, "some of your cognitive symptoms could indicate medication interactions or underlying health issues that need immediate attention. Are you taking any new medications or supplements that we haven't discussed?" When I mentioned Dr. Thompson's concerns to Angela, her reaction was immediate and defensive. "Harold, that doctor doesn't understand modern geriatric psychiatry," she said. "He's using outdated approaches while I'm giving you access to breakthrough therapies that aren't widely available yet. You need to decide whether you trust your daughter-in-law or whether you trust someone who sees you for 15 minutes every few months." Angela's emotional manipulation was sophisticated and heartbreaking. She'd alternate between expressing hurt that I didn't trust her professional expertise and warning me about the dangers of too many medical opinions interfering with her treatment plan. Every conversation became about choosing family loyalty over outside medical interference. "Harold, I'm a licensed pharmacist with 8 years of experience in medication management," she'd say when I expressed doubts about my worsening symptoms. "I've spent months researching the specific compounds that would be most beneficial for your grief and anxiety. Don't you think I want what's best for my own father-in-law?" The episodes continued getting worse over the following months. I started having trouble remembering conversations, making business decisions, and handling the routine tasks that I'd managed successfully for decades. Angela would express concern about my declining mental state while simultaneously discouraging me from seeking additional medical opinions or changing my treatment approach. "Harold, you're obviously struggling with age-related cognitive decline," she'd say during family meetings where she and Marcus would discuss my deteriorating condition. "Maybe it's time to accept that managing a 400-acre farm is too much responsibility for someone with your current mental limitations." What I didn't understand then was that Angela's grief support supplements were actually combinations of benzodiazepines, antipsychotics, and other psychoactive medications in doses calculated to cause chronic cognitive impairment without immediately fatal effects. She was slowly destroying my mental capacity while documenting my declining condition as evidence that I was becoming incapable of managing my own affairs. The final phase of her scheme began when Angela convinced Marcus that I needed professional oversight for all my major decisions. "Marcus, your father is showing signs of dementia that make it dangerous for him to live alone or handle business responsibilities," she'd say. "We need to start discussing guardianship arrangements before he makes decisions that could destroy everything your family has built." The final drugging attempt happened on a Thursday afternoon in November during what I thought was going to be a normal family visit with Marcus, Angela, and my 15-year-old granddaughter, Emma. Angela had been particularly concerned about my increasing agitation and paranoia that week, bringing me what she claimed were emergency anxiety medications to help stabilize my emotional state. "Harold," she said, as we sat on my front porch watching Emma play in the yard, "I've been consulting with some psychiatric colleagues about your recent symptoms, and we all agree that you need immediate intervention to prevent a complete mental breakdown. The stress of managing this farm alone is destroying your cognitive function." Angela pulled out a thermos containing what she claimed was a specialized herbal blend that had been formulated specifically for elderly farmers dealing with anxiety, depression, and early-stage dementia. She poured the tea into 2 cups, explaining that the herbs needed to be consumed while hot to maximize their therapeutic effectiveness. "This treatment is very sophisticated," she said, while handling the cups with unusual care, "and it's designed to calm your nervous system while improving your memory and concentration. It's based on the latest research in geriatric neuropsychiatry, and it could prevent the kind of cognitive deterioration that would require institutional care." Chatta. Something about Angela's demeanor that afternoon felt different, more urgent, more clinical, like she was under pressure to complete a medical procedure rather than just providing family support. She kept checking her watch and seemed anxious about making sure I consumed the tea at exactly the right time relative to my afternoon medications. "Harold, you need to drink all of this right now," she said, pushing one of the cups toward me with unusual insistence. "The herbal compounds are time-sensitive, and they won't work properly unless you take the full dose within the therapeutic window." That's when I noticed something that probably saved my sanity and my life. While Angela was explaining the importance of drinking the tea immediately, she momentarily turned away to watch Emma, and I saw her quickly switch our cups, moving mine to her side of the porch table and replacing it with the cup that had been sitting near her purse. The switch was so smooth and practiced that it was obvious she'd planned it in advance. Angela thought she was being clever, giving me a cup of psychoactive drugs while keeping a cup of harmless tea for herself in case I asked her to drink some too, or if anyone questioned why she wasn't taking the same medication. But I'd been suspicious of Angela's treatments for weeks, and seeing her switch the cups confirmed every doubt I'd been having about her true intentions. While she was distracted with watching Emma and explaining the tea's benefits, I quickly switched the cups back, putting the drug tea on her side of the table. "This is a special blend for your nerves," Angela said, lifting what she thought was the harmless cup to demonstrate how safe the herbal tea was. "See? It tastes just like chamomile with a slightly bitter aftertaste from the therapeutic herbs." I watched in fascination and horror as my daughter-in-law drank the psychoactive drug she'd prepared to destroy my mental capacity. She drained the entire cup while maintaining conversation about my treatment plan, probably expecting me to follow her example and consume what she thought was my mind-altering dose. 20 minutes later, Angela collapsed on my front porch, her body convulsing as benzodiazepine and antipsychotic overdose began shutting down her nervous system. Emma screamed and ran into the house while Marcus called 911, and I watched my daughter-in-law experience the cognitive destruction she'd been planning for me while trying to process the fact that someone I'd trusted with my health had been systematically poisoning me for months. At Forest General Hospital, the emergency room team worked frantically to save Angela's life, while I sat in the waiting room, trying to process the fact that my daughter-in-law had been systematically drugging me to steal my farm. The medical staff initially assumed that Angela had accidentally overdosed on medications she'd been taking for her own anxiety, but Dr. Sarah Martinez, the toxicologist who analyzed her blood work, immediately recognized signs of massive psychoactive drug poisoning. "This woman has been poisoned with an enormous combination of benzodiazepines, antipsychotics, and other sedative medications," Dr. Martinez told the medical team. "The concentrations in her blood are extremely dangerous, enough to cause respiratory failure and permanent brain damage. Someone gave her a carefully calculated mixture of psychiatric drugs that was intended to be incapacitating." I knew I had to tell the truth about what had happened, even though it meant admitting that my own daughter-in-law had been poisoning me for months. Detective James Wilson was called to investigate what the hospital had reported as a possible suicide attempt or accidental pharmaceutical overdose. "Detective," I said, "Angela didn't try to kill herself, and this wasn't an accident. She was trying to drug me with psychoactive medications disguised as herbal tea, but I switched our cups when she wasn't looking. She drank the drugs she prepared to destroy my mental capacity so she could steal my farm." I explained Angela's months of suspicious medical treatments, my progressive cognitive decline under her care, and the cup-switching incident that had just occurred. Detective Wilson listened carefully, taking detailed notes about Angela's access to pharmaceutical drugs and her potential financial motives for incapacitating me. "Mr. Jefferson," he said, "what you're describing is systematic elder abuse through pharmaceutical manipulation. If you're right, your daughter-in-law has been using her pharmacy license to drug you into incompetency while planning to gain control of your property through guardianship proceedings." Gut. My blood tests revealed exactly what Dr. Martinez had suspected: dangerous levels of psychoactive medications that weren't on any of my prescription lists, evidence of chronic drugging that had been building up in my system for months. The levels weren't immediately fatal, but they were high enough to cause the cognitive symptoms I'd been experiencing and would have eventually led to complete mental incapacitation. Within 48 hours, Detective Wilson had obtained search warrants for Angela's house, her pharmacy workplace, and her personal records. What he found was a systematic drugging conspiracy that had been months in the planning: research on cognitive impairing drugs, calculations of incapacitating dosages, and detailed planning for my expected mental decline. Angela's pharmacy access records showed that she'd been stealing benzodiazepines, antipsychotics, and other psychoactive medications from her workplace, claiming they were for elderly patients who needed specialized psychiatric care. She'd been systematically acquiring the drugs needed to destroy my mental capacity while using her professional credentials to avoid suspicion. The most damning evidence was discovered on Angela's personal computer: detailed research on guardianship laws, incompetency proceedings, and real estate transfer procedures, showing how she planned to gain control of my farm once I was declared mentally unfit. She'd been planning not just my mental destruction, but the legal mechanism for stealing my land. Detective Wilson also found communications between Angela and real estate developers about selling farmland for residential development, discussing the financial potential of my 400 acres if it could be liberated from agricultural restrictions. She'd been planning to destroy my mind and then sell my family's legacy to the highest bidder. But the most chilling discovery was Angela's detailed journal documenting my cognitive decline as evidence for future legal proceedings. Harold's memory problems are becoming severe enough to justify guardianship, one entry read. A few more months of treatment, and he'll be completely incompetent to manage his affairs. Then we can finally unlock the value of this property. If you are listening us, comment Special Blend, so I know you have stayed. The criminal trial took place 10 months later, after Angela had recovered from her self-inflicted drug overdose and been deemed mentally competent to stand trial. The courtroom in Jackson was packed with rural Mississippi residents who'd followed the case through local media coverage, shocked by the story of a pharmacist trying to drug her father-in-law into incompetency to steal his family farm. Angela had hired the most expensive criminal defense team in Mississippi, lawyers who specialized in defending medical professionals accused of harming patients. Their strategy was to claim that I was a confused elderly farmer who'd misunderstood Angela's legitimate attempts to provide psychiatric care, and that the drug overdose was a tragic accident caused by medication errors. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Angela's lead attorney said during opening statements, this case isn't about elder abuse or farm theft conspiracy. This is about a devoted daughter-in-law trying to help her aging father-in-law manage his grief and cognitive decline, and a tragic misunderstanding that resulted in accidental poisoning during routine medical care. But their defense strategy collapsed under the weight of scientific evidence and Angela's own documented planning. Dr. Martinez testified about the massive drug concentrations found in Angela's blood, explaining that the combination and dosages could only have resulted from deliberate preparation of psychoactive poison rather than therapeutic treatment. Detective Wilson presented Angela's research files showing months of planning for my mental incapacitation and the real estate transactions she intended to pursue once she gained control of my property. The jury heard recordings of Angela discussing my deteriorating condition with lawyers who specialized in guardianship proceedings. The defendant wasn't trying to help her father-in-law manage his mental health, the prosecutor explained to the jury. She was systematically destroying his cognitive function while planning to steal his family farm through fraudulent guardianship proceedings. The fact that she poisoned herself reveals both the dangerous nature of her drugs and the calculated planning behind her actions. My testimony was the most important part of the trial. I had to describe months of trusting Angela's medical expertise while she was slowly destroying my mind, and the moment I realized she was trying to incapacitate me for my land. Angela was supposed to be taking care of my health, I told the jury. Instead, she was using her pharmacy license to poison me so she could steal everything my family has built over 4 generations. Marcus's testimony was heartbreaking for everyone involved. He had to admit that he'd been manipulated by Angela into believing that I was becoming mentally incompetent, and that he'd been prepared to support guardianship proceedings based on her fabricated evidence of my cognitive decline. "I thought my wife was helping my father," he said. "I never imagined she was destroying his mind to steal his property." Emma, now 16, testified about the changes she'd observed in both her grandfather and her mother over the months leading up to the poisoning. "Grandpa seemed confused and tired whenever Mama was taking care of him," she said. "But when she wasn't around, he seemed like his normal self. I thought it was strange, but I didn't know what it meant." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning guilty verdicts on charges of attempted incapacitation through pharmaceutical abuse, conspiracy to commit guardianship fraud, elder abuse, theft of controlled substances, and professional misconduct. Angela showed no emotion when the verdicts were read, probably still believing that her professional credentials would protect her from serious consequences. Judge Patricia Williams sentenced Angela to 25 years in prison without possibility of parole for 15 years. "This court has never seen such a calculated abuse of pharmaceutical expertise and family trust," she said during sentencing. The defendant used her medical training and marriage relationship to systematically destroy an elderly man's mental capacity while planning to steal his ancestral property, showing a level of professional betrayal and family cruelty that demands the maximum penalty under law. 4 years have passed since that terrible Thursday afternoon when I caught my daughter-in-law trying to drug me into incompetency and watched her accidentally poison herself with her own mind-destroying medication, and Jefferson Family Farm is thriving under new legal protections that ensure no one can ever again use medical manipulation to steal our ancestral land. Angela is serving her sentence at Central Mississippi Correctional Facility, and she's never attempted to contact our family since her conviction. Her pharmacy license was permanently revoked, and she can never again work in any medical capacity that gives her access to vulnerable patients. Marcus divorced her while she was awaiting trial, and he's slowly rebuilding his relationship with me and Emma after realizing how completely he'd been manipulated. My cognitive function recovered completely once I stopped consuming Angela's psychoactive supplements and returned to proper medical care under Dr. Thompson's supervision. The memory problems, confusion, and disorientation that had plagued me for months under Angela's treatment disappeared within weeks of removing the psychiatric drugs from my system. I'm now 80 years old and mentally sharper than I was at 76 before Angela's drugging campaign began. The most important outcome of this experience has been establishing the Ruby Jefferson Foundation for Rural Elder Abuse Prevention, which provides education and resources to help elderly farmers recognize when family members might be exploiting their medical vulnerabilities for property theft. We've learned that pharmaceutical abuse targeting elderly landowners is more common than most people realize, especially when the perpetrators have medical training. The experience taught me something important about trust, family, and the corrupting power of valuable property in relationships. Angela wasn't a desperate criminal driven to elder abuse by poverty. She was an educated professional who thought her pharmaceutical knowledge gave her the right to destroy my mind for land she hadn't earned and didn't deserve. My will has been completely restructured to ensure that no family member can ever again be motivated to hurt me for inheritance. The farm is now protected by an agricultural trust that ensures it will remain in farming use regardless of who inherits it, and detailed medical directives prevent anyone from administering medications without multiple independent physician approvals. The most frightening part of this story is how easily Angela could have succeeded if I hadn't been suspicious enough to catch her switching the cups. Medical professionals who abuse elderly family members have tremendous advantages: access to incapacitating drugs, knowledge of psychiatric medications, and professional credibility that makes their victims' mental decline look like natural aging. The front porch, where Angela tried to destroy my mind, has become my favorite place to sit in the evenings, watching the sun set over fields that she'll never be able to touch again. Every peaceful moment I spend in that chair represents a victory over someone who thought my property was worth more than my sanity, and a commitment to protecting other elderly people from predators who use medical knowledge as a weapon. Tell me in the comments, have you ever suspected that family members with medical training might be tampering with your medications to affect your mental state? Have you ever noticed unexplained cognitive symptoms that started when certain people began helping with your medical care? Have you ever realized that the people who marry into your family might be more interested in your property than your well-being? And if this story reminded you to trust your instincts when something feels wrong about family members' medical advice, especially when valuable property is involved, hit that subscribe button for Grandpa's Diaries. I've got more stories about surviving betrayal by people you trust most. I'll see you tomorrow with another cup of coffee and another truth about what happens when medical knowledge meets family greed, and how sometimes the only way to prove you're being drugged is to let the person drugging you experience their own medicine firsthand.